Hello and welcome to Word Problems Wednesday, Week 1. I am your host, Latrell Jackson, math coach of the KOG Math Success Academy. And this week we are going to be working with percentages in our math word problem entitled Poll Percentages in Instagram Stories. So we must first remind ourselves of the three-step process. If you did not watch my video on the 3 steps you need to take in order to solve a math word problem, you can go ahead and click the video in the description or the card at the top of this video so you can watch it. And the 3 steps are outlined in that video, but here is a summary. Step 1 is RRTR, which allows you to exercise your reading comprehension. Step 2 is scavenger hunt, where we'll be looking for 4 things in our word problem. And step 3 is solve with strategy and purpose. So that also includes 4 key things we want to include when we're solving. Okay, let us begin. So step 1, RRTR, I'm sure you were wondering what that stands for. Read, reread, think, and rewrite. So here is our word problem. Once again, it's entitled Poll Percentages on Instagram Stories. It says, Knowledge Over Grades posted a poll on Instagram Stories asking if people preferred binders or notebooks to store their notes. 19 people voted in all. When Knowledge Over Grades posted the results, 32% voted binders and 68% voted notebooks. How many people actually voted binders and notebooks? Okay, so our first step is to read, which is what we did, and our second step is to reread, and then third is to think. But we're going to do them at the same time. So let's read it again. Rereading is good because when you read it the first time, it's not everything registers. Reading the second time helps you to pull out more details and kind of figure out what's going on. So it says, Knowledge Over Grades posted a poll on Instagram Stories asking if people preferred binders or notebooks to store their notes. 19 people voted in all. When Knowledge Over Grades posted the results, 32% voted binders and 68% voted notebooks. How many people actually voted binders and notebooks? Okay, that was the second time reading it. Now let's think about it. So, Instagram Stories. If you have an Instagram account, that means you have access to post on your stories, and these stories actually last only these posts in your stories only last 24 hours and then they expire. There are different stickers in your stories that you have access to, and one of them is a poll sticker. So people voted either binders or notebooks. So that's something that we can try to picture in our mind. All you have to do is tap binders or notebooks. 19 people voted in all. So out of everybody who voted, 19 people, some of them voted binders and some of them voted notebooks. And we have a percentage. This happens after the poll is done or when it's almost done. You can share the results of the poll, and it always shares in percentages. So 32% voted binders and 68% voted notebooks. The question is, how many people actually voted binders and notebooks? So we have the percentages. We need to find out the numbers. Okay, so now we can rewrite this word problem. First thing we want to do is replace numbers with blank spaces. Then we're going to rewrite in our own words. Next, we're going to draw a picture or diagram of the situation. And last, we're going to replace the numbers. black back in place of the blank spaces. All right, so blank out the numbers. Wherever there was a number, we put a blank space. And right here, I'm going to use my little marker. Right here was the word 19. So that is a number 2. It says blank people voted in all. That was 19. The reason for blanking out numbers is because we want to focus on the situation, not the numbers. Because with the numbers, we'll start trying to do math when we don't really fully understand what the situation is. Next step. Now we're going to rewrite the question in our own words, okay? So I kind of modified it a little bit. The first part, the first sentence and the second sentence are the same, blank spaces for the numbers. The next sentence, it actually is entered. I put it on another line for its own line so that it can just stand out on its own. And I put later, as you see, that's highlighted in yellow. So it says later, when Knowledge Over Grades posted the results, and then the rest of that sentence. I added later just so we can realize that it took time for people to vote, for those 19 people to accumulate, and for us to get our percentages of the 19. And then I put on another line how many people actually voted binders and notebooks. So everything is spaced out in order for us to take it in chunks instead of one big chunk. Now let's try to draw a picture of what actually transpired. I don't know if you know what a binder is, so let's draw what a binder is. Okay, so got an idea of what binders and notebooks look like. Let's kind of think about what the voting system was like. So let's say this is the total amount of voters, total number of voters. Because remember, we took the numbers out. We're not focusing on numbers now. We just want to think about the situation. So out of the total voters, we have a certain amount that voted notebooks and a certain amount that voted binders. Okay. This can be the number and the percent. So out of the total, there's a certain amount and a certain percent that voted notebooks and a certain amount or certain percent that voted binders. Picture yourself tapping one of these that you actually prefer, notebooks or binders. Okay, so there's a diagram that we can use to help us understand what's going on in this word problem. So after we drew what we thought transpired in this situation, here is my actual post to Knowledge Over Grades Instagram account for my stories. And the first one is the actual poll. People took some time to vote, binders or notebooks. And then when it was time, I shared the results. Now I blanked out the actual percentages just so we can stick with our not dealing with numbers yet. And this is just the result of what it looked like after the poll was over. Okay, so number 4 in rewriting the word problem is actually replacing the numbers. Now we're ready to see the numbers again. And as you see, they're back 32%, 68%, and 19 people voted in all. Our 19 is actually changed from word form to number form. So that was another me writing in my own words and notation that I implemented. Now for step 2, we're going to go on a scavenger hunt. And these are the things we're going to be looking for. 1, numbers. 2, unknowns or variables. 3, hidden operations. 4, separate steps. Okay? So, number 1, we're going to be on the hunt for numbers. We know that our numbers are 19 people voted in all, and we know that 32% voted binders and 68% voted notebooks. So that is number 1 in our hunt. Number 2 is unknowns and variables. So we're trying to figure out what the thing we're trying to find out. So that's going to be in the question. How many people actually voted binders and notebooks? How many people? How many? So we're looking for a specific number. Our third hunt is going to be for operations. So operations are usually hidden within our word problem. So you may not see it immediately, it may not stand out to you, but it's there. So I highlighted 32% voted binders and 68% voted. When dealing with percentages, we're always finding the percentage of a number, okay? So 100% is everybody, the total amount, but when it's anything less than 100%, it's going to be a part of that total amount. So 32% who voted binders would be 32% of the total amount, which is 19. 68% who voted notebooks are 68% of the total amount of people who voted, 19. Okay, so now we want to ask ourselves, what kind of word or what kind of operation can we get from the word of? What we can do is look at our pre-algebra translation guide. Here's our pre-algebra translation guide, and we are going to go to the table and look for the word of in our verbal word and phrase column. So as you see, all of these are words and phrases, and on the left side of that is an operation. So I'm scrolling, I don't see the word of. Oh, I found the word of. So what kind of word is of? Of is a multiplication word. So let's look at the example, 20% of students. And the algebraic translation would look like this. We change 20% to a decimal by moving the decimal over 2 times from behind the 0, 2 times to the left to be in front of the 2. So it's multiplication. S would be students, 0.20 times S. So multiplication is the operation we're going to be using. And when we look back at our problem, we're going to be multiplying our 32%, change it to a decimal, and multiply it to 19 because that's the total amount of people who voted, and then 68% multiply that to 19. Now, separate steps is kind of what I just explained. Our total is 19, and we have 2 different types of voters. One part of the 19 voted binders, and the other part of the 19 voted notebooks. And the question asks how many people actually voted binders and notebooks. So that's why I highlighted in red voted binders and then notebooks, because those are going to represent 2 parts to this answer. So, do you feel ready to solve? If you're ready to solve, I want you to put ready in the comments below, and we're going to get to solving. So what can we consider when we are solving with strategy and purpose? first we want to make sure we solve with strategy by picking a strategy, whether it's a formula or an operation, we're going to be applying a process or rule. Then we're going to double check our question, make sure we answer the question completely. So that's our purpose. Our purpose is to answer the question completely. Then we're going to label our values or numbers, and we're going to circle or box our answers so that they stand out. So the first thing we want to do is pick a strategy. First, before we do that, is we need to write down our information so that we can know what to use as our numbers. So we had 19 people who voted, 19 voters. 32% voted binders, and 68% voted notebooks. All right, let's leave it over here in the corner. What we're first going to use as our strategy is percent proportion. Probably seen this, heard of this. And that is just two ratios set equal to each other, like two fractions. And the numerator and denominator of each are significant. So the numerator of the first ratio represents parts. The denominator of the first ratio is whole. The numerator of the second ratio is percent, and the denominator is 100. Okay, part over whole equals percent over 100. So what we need to do, what we're going to do is identify the portions of our proportion and plug it in for each binder and notebook. So for binders, we got part, whole, and percent. 100 is always already filled in. So let's start with whole. That's the more reasonable thing that we know, because we know the total amount of voters who voted. That's what whole means. So the total amount of voters was 19. That's the whole. Part is the number that voted binders. That's the part. We don't know that. That's what we're trying to figure out. So I'm going to put B as our variable for binders. And we know percent. We know that the percentage that voted for binders was 32. So let's set up our percent proportion for binders. Our part is B. Our denominator for our whole is 19. And then our numerator for percent is 32. And then denominator is always 100. The process we're going to use is cross multiplying. So let's cross multiply like this. 19 times 32, that is 608. And B times 100 is 100. B. We want to isolate B, so we divide by 100 on both sides. 100 divided by 100 is 1, and 1 times B is just B. And 608 divided by 100 is 6.08. Okay, so that's our answer for B. Now let us work on notebooks. We need to find our part, whole, and percent for notebooks. So starting with whole, we know that the whole is the total amount of people who voted. So that's 19. And the percentage of the people who voted of 19 is 68. The part we don't know. Part is the number of people who voted notebooks. So we're going to put N for notebooks. Now let's set up our percent proportion. Part is N, Whole is 19, percent is 68, and 100 underneath that. We're cross multiplying. 19 times 68 is 1292. And n times 100 is 100n. Once again, we divide by 100 on both sides. These cancel and we're left with just n. And 1292 divided by 100 is 12.92. Okay, so those are our values for the number of people who voted for binders and the number of people who voted for notebooks. We're going to address that again in a few minutes, but I'm going to show you the second strategy. Let's write that up in the corner. Okay, so now we're able to move on to the second part of solving, which is to double check the question. We want to make sure we answer everything correctly. And if we look, we can see that the question is at the bottom. It says how many people actually voted binders and notebooks. So remember, we got our answers. For binders was 6.08, and our answer for notebook was 12.92. Okay, we're double checking to make sure we answered the question completely and correctly. We're talking about people here. Have you ever seen a decimal or a portion of a person? I have not. So we have decimals in our answers. We actually need to round them up or down to the nearest whole person, right? So let's work on that. Let's work on n. That is a approximation symbol. And 12.92, how do we round? We look at, when we want to round to a certain decimal, a certain place value, we look at the number before it, and if it's 5 and up, we go to the next number for that place value. If it's 4 and below, we stay the same. We want to round to the ones place. So we're looking at our 2. And the number before 2 is 9. 9 is 5 and up, so we round our 2 up to the next number, which is 13. And when we're looking at our ones place, or our whole number for the amount of people who voted binders, we look at the number before it, which is 0. 0 is 4 and below, so we stay the same. 6 stays the same. Okay, so now we have whole people. The amount of people who voted for binders is 6, and the amount of people who voted for notebooks is 13. How do we know? We did the math, and let's add them up and just check and make sure that equals a total of 19 voters. 13 plus 6, 3 plus 6 is 9, 1 plus 0 is 1. That's 19. So we were able to get the answer to this word problem in several steps. So number 3 says for us to label our answers. So B equals 6, it's kind of labeling, but we want to really label so that we know what B is, and B is binders. So 6 represents the number of people who voted for binders. So we can say 6 people voted binders. And then for 13, we can say 13 people voted notebooks. And if we had a sheet full of work, we would want to circle or box our answers. So we know that we had 2 answers. We can box them both together. And you're done. Yay! So thank you for working through this math problem with me. It was a real life math problem because it actually happened to me on my Instagram account. And I made it into a word problem to help you see that we use math in everyday scenarios. So if you would like more resources and tutorials like this, you can join our KOG Math Success Library. You can become a free member with the link in the description of this video, and you'll have access to a bunch more resources that can help you solve math word problems and other types of math problems that you're going to encounter. So I can't wait to see you inside the library. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please hit that subscribe button and the bell next to it. Go ahead and share with a friend if they need some help with math word problems. And also make sure you come back next week with another Math Word Problem Wednesday. Have a good one.